All right, we're back with a follow-up on the AIM Soft Industries AIM shooting device. Um, I expected to take a couple of heat rounds after that initial review came out. I didn't quite expect such a strong reaction from them. And their pro shooter. So they've got a couple of claims I want to talk about, and a couple of things that they said that I want to talk about. First of all, apparently they have a pro shooter, um, and that's their terminology for this person that they sent it to. I wouldn't necessarily call him that. So he's an instructor, a full-time instructor apparently. So if you want to go by the strict idea of a professional shooter, I'd be comfortable saying that we gave this to a professional instructor. A professional shooter is somebody who gets paid to shoot, and the only place that I know of where that happens is in the sports. And this person, he doesn't shoot the sports, or if he does, he doesn't do it very often or very well. So a dubious claim to say, because they said on one of the comments, hey, we gave this to our pro shooter, and there's going to be more content to follow. So, that's a little bit misleading, and I also think it was misleading to give. So apparently they sent him the rear sight. They offered me this after the fact as well. They sent him the rear sight, the AIM device, a front sight, and ammo. And so, and I don't have it's your company. You do what you want. That doesn't bother me. What does bother me a little bit is that you sent somebody a front sight, but your customers you're just kind of leaving out there to find it out on their own. Like, hey, you figure out what front sight works, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today over on the IDPA target, and I'll get to that in a minute. But on two places on their website, they say it's compatible with Glock, standard Glock sights. They show a guy holding a Glock with a standard Glock sight on it, and it says right next to it, like I said, compatible with standard front sights and some modified sights. So I think we all saw, even their pro shooter didn't have the best. He was shooting low, just like I was, with the sight that they gave him. So yeah, and on top of that, I watched his videos. I didn't think that he gave it a real test of shooting capability. He was shooting 4 yard slow fire groups, 5 yard slow fire groups, and he went out to 15, but it was all slow fire. I think that this thing, it's within the realm of reason that you could line this thing up. I think it's more difficult to line up than regular iron sights, but you can align this sight and shoot slowly and hit things. But I don't need a peep sight that's slow. And then he did some 5-shot, like rapid fire or quick fire, bringing the splits down a bit. But when it came time to show those targets, he didn't show them. He showed all the targets when he did his slow fire groups, but when it came time to show those ones, he didn't. So I guess we'll never know the results of that. So yeah, I've got another video over here I want to show you. Just kind of, I didn't feel like I gave like the best explanation on my first video of why this thing is probably, well, definitely not as good as a red dot, and probably not as good as iron sights either, traditional iron sights. So let's take a look at that, and I'll come back at the end and we'll kind of wrap this all up. All right, so here you've got a standard IDPA target. I colored in the 0 and the down 1 because you couldn't see it very well if I didn't, and really if you're shooting threes, then it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so this is just a crude AIM device that I made, or printed out, I guess. So this is the scheme, or the aiming scheme that they have on the website. This is, for what I can tell, because they don't really put out too much information about how you're supposed to shoot this thing, other than so I'll correct the record now. Like on 2 places in their website, it says this will work with standard Glock sights, and they have a picture of a guy shooting, or a person holding a Glock with a standard Glock front sight using this rear. That isn't going to work. If you click buy it now, or I want to buy this thing, in the description, which I missed, it says you should be using a 0.300 height front sight. So my bad for missing that. But on the second half, I did have that height sight, the second 5x5 in trial run, and the results weren't what they said they were. And their own pro shooter didn't have those results either. He had to aim above this line to get it to hit, or to get it to not be shooting low. So, and that's with a sight that was provided by them and their ammo. So anyway, if you line this up and you put it right there, I assume it's going to hit a little bit low, because that's what their guy found. If you aimed slightly above that line, you might hit right there. So right off the bat, that's telling me they don't have the right height either. Like, they don't know where the zero on this thing is. And where the zero on this thing is just above this line, like kind of the tip of this front sight. Maybe that's what they were going for. I'm not sure. Maybe it's like a Glock. You know, it is on a Glock, so maybe it's the tip of the front sight, and maybe that's what's happening. Maybe that's what the guy got wrong. But on most combat sights like this, at least SIGs that I shoot, the front sight covers what it is you're trying to hit. So that could be his issue, is that, like, it is lined up like this. It's just this is your point of impact, not the center of the dot. Even if that's the case, this is your zero right here. So if your dot, or if the sights return and they're slightly off, like this, that is a much bigger difference than if they were like this, or somewhere in here. Like, not, this isn't a good representation. This is a really wide rear, but you kind of have to, like, the zero is kind of like the zero of where your point of impact is just kind of floating right here. So to say that this is as good as a dot, meaning that if my sight returns and my dot on my, if this were the aperture of a dot and not the aperture of an aim device, and my dot ends up right here, I know it's a zero. If it returns here, I know it's going to hit a zero. If it returns right here, I know it's going to hit a zero. If this returns at all, not right there, it's not a zero. It's not going to hit. It's going to go to the left, to the right. And as you progress in distance, which I don't think that they were accounting for that well, as you progress in distance, that's going to matter even more. So the idea that this is somehow like analogous to a red dot is just not true. To say that it's as good as a red dot is like demonstrably false. This is just, this just shows. It has to be this. 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 If it's at all this sight picture right now as a red dot would hit right where that red dot is. This thing would be way the fuck off. So like, it's your zero on a red dot, or your point of impact, depending on how you've sighted it in, moves with your dot, with your red dot, like around. If you're shooting this thing, it stays in the center of this thing. So like, well, yeah, it works. It'll work just fine if you're going to shoot super slow. If you want to shoot super slow and line that thing up every single time, see, this is why I say it's worse than irons too, is because this is more difficult to line up than iron sights. Like, whether or not you use blacked out rear or dots in the rear, this is more difficult than if it's dots lining up the planet, or if it's just a blacked out rear, putting the dot in between the rear aperture and pulling the trigger. Like, and the reason is because somewhere in here is your floating zero. Like, your zero is somewhere in here floating around, and you're not real sure where it is. They're not real sure where it is. Their pro shooter isn't real sure where it is, because he might think he knows where it is now, because he shot it enough to know that, like, I can slow fire this thing. But like in any sort of higher level engagement, like, because he's super into talking about tactical stuff, if you have to draw and engage quickly, this thing is going to be all over the place. It's not going to return. I mean, like, yes, to a certain extent, if you're super close, it's going to return to the same place. If you're shooting at any sort of distance, and every time I say, like, hey, you can't shoot at distance, this thing, he's like, well, I don't agree with him, but he says, well, police law enforcement shooting is 3 to 4 yards and whatever like that. But that adage isn't true. Like, Active Self-Protection debunked that a long time ago. You can check that out on their website. It's just not true. So the idea that like this thing is good enough, like it's not as good as irons. It's certainly not as good as a dot, and it's demonstrably so not as good. So take that for what it is. Is it a mass aiming scheme that will get you hits super close? Sure. And I said that on my video where I got plenty of zeros that day from being super close to targets. But I don't need this huge aperture or really any sights to shoot zeros at super close distance. So I don't know. Again, we're back to square one. Like, this isn't good for what they say it is. It isn't good for irons. It isn't good. It certainly isn't as good as a dot. Like, it just isn't. All right, guys. So that's it. That's really all I have to say about it. I don't know that there's anything left to say. Their guy, he says I'm wrong. He says I'm faking it for a bad review. I'm not. I shot this thing the way I would shoot a dot, which is the way that what they purported that you could do with it, and you can't. I asked him several times over and over again, like, okay, if you can do this, if you can do the 5x5, then show me. If I'm wrong, I'm here. Like, everything that I do, everything that I shoot, all the reviews, all the matches, just everything that I think is generally out there for public consumption. His videos are a lot of talking and not a lot of shooting. So I asked him, hey, if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. He has yet to. I mean, like, he's responded, but most of it has been excuses. Like, I'm busy, I have a wife and a family and all that. So, hey man, I have a wife and a family too. But I'm out here training, I'm out here doing it. So if you're gonna say something is good, you need to have the capacity to evaluate it. And then if you get called out on it, well, then demonstrate that you have the capability to evaluate it. And if you're not going to do that, then I don't know, man, just don't talk about it. So anyway, if you have the time and the means, check out our website, which is www.dz-214.com, where you can donate to the vetted veterans charities that we support. Yeah, we'll talk to you next time.